What is up, guys? Rick Cacus here, and today we are going to be taking a much closer look at 3 exotic heavy machine guns in Destiny: the Nova Mortis, the Abbadon, and the Thunderlord. Now, with the recent addition of the Dawning live event to Destiny, the Nova Mortis and the Abbadon were added as semi-new exotics into the game, with both of them simply being different elemental versions of the existing exotic heavy machine gun, the Thunderlord. The Thunderlord is, of course, Arc, the Nova Mortis is Void, and the Abbadon is Solar. Now, all 3 of these weapons on paper are exactly the same except for the appearance and, of course, the elemental effect. Now, the exotic perks of these weapons are all named differently, but they all have the exact same effect. So, the same perks, on paper the same stats, they have the same aim assist, equip speed, damage, recoil, all of that stuff is exactly the same. But are they the same? Is the only things that are different between these 3 guns the elements and the appearance? And of course the names. Or are there hidden differences between these 3 guns that actually make them a little bit more different than you may think? Well, that's why I'm making this video. I've already seen a ton of comments. I've gotten, people tweeting at me saying that these weapons are actually different, that there's hidden perks even involved in these 3 weapons. Well, are there? To find out, I tested each one of these weapons extensively, looking for any minute differences that might indicate any of these hidden stats or hidden perks. And my findings are actually somewhat surprising. Now, let's address first and foremost some of the hidden perk claims of these weapons. Some people are saying that the Abbadon has the hidden perk Firefly, and you can actually see when I take the Abbadon and test it out against simple enemies and I shoot them in the head, you can see an explosion occur. A fiery explosion occurs when I shoot these enemies in the head. So what does that mean? Is this a secret exotic perk? Well, actually it is. But it's a secret exotic perk that all 3 of these weapons share. Now, this exotic perk does not come up anywhere obvious on these weapons. It doesn't say in any perk description that this weapon will cause enemies to explode, but as you can see, it clearly does. However, you can also see that some of the enemies I shoot in the head with all 3 of these weapons don't actually explode. So Firefly is just not involved here. Firefly is a guaranteed explosion when you get a headshot. This is clearly not Firefly, and furthermore, you can see that the different elemental versions will actually cause different elemental explosions as well. The Nova Mortis will cause a void explosion, and the Thunderlord causes an arc explosion. Now, this is actually one of the things that makes these exotic heavy machine guns actually quite effective in PvE. Not only are you mowing down enemies with the bullets, but you're also causing them to explode every once in a while, and that explosion is doing elemental damage, which is obviously fantastic if you're playing in a burn playlist like a heroic strike playlist. So that's something I thought I would cover for those people who aren't as familiar with the inner workings of the Thunderlord. But yes, all 3 of these weapons share the same hidden exotic perk, causing enemies to explode with elemental damage when killed. But are there any more differences between these weapons? One of the claims I hear all the time is recoil. People saying that, the Nova Mortis or the Abbadon or the Thunderlord has more or less or the same or whatever, a differing amount of recoil between them. So I tested them out. And the first thing I've got to say is that testing recoil is very hard to do because recoil is so randomized. Sometimes when you're using the same exact weapon, it's going to recoil straight upwards, sometimes to the left, sometimes it's going to pretty much stay on target. And you can actually see here by the test I'm doing using the same exact weapon and going from box to box to box, when you compare the recoil just with itself, it's giving us different patterns. Again, sometimes it recoils violently upwards, and sometimes it stays pretty much on target. And that's due to the inherent randomization that Destiny's recoil has. Now, when you're shooting these weapons initially, they all have the exact same recoil. It's very easy for someone to be comparing all three of these weapons and say they are exactly the same in terms of recoil because they start out exactly the same. However, the exotic perk for all three of these weapons has them increase in rate of fire and not decrease in damage, so that actually makes them pretty damn good for their damage output and pretty damn good actually against bosses if you have a lot of ammunition. But that's a different story. When these guns increase in rate of fire, the recoil becomes actually different amongst all three of them. So, as you can see here with the Thunderlord, this is the OG. This gun has been in the game for a very long time, and when it increases in its rate of fire, you can see that the recoil becomes less severe. You can just very clearly see by the clip I'm showing you that when the rate of fire increases, the amount of recoil, the amount that this gun's sights jump around from space to space to space, is definitely lessened. But you can clearly see here, when I switch to the Abbadon, it doesn't have that same recoil reduction. When it has that increase to its rate of fire, it's still jumping around a ton with its gun sights. It's jumping around the exact same as if you just started to shoot it. And, you know, when I'm done shooting an entire magazine, I end up way out of control. Like, I am way further recoiled on this wall than the Thunderlord was. And the exact same thing happens to the Nova Mortis. It has insane recoil even when it gets that increase to rate of fire. So, there you go, and that's something that I'm sure a lot of you guys maybe weren't expecting. A lot of people think these weapons are exactly the same except for the elements and the appearance, but these weapons actually do have different recoil factors. I think there was actually a patch that was applied to the Thunderlord because, of course, the exotic perk says it's supposed to gain accuracy when you hold the trigger. When it gains that increase to the rate of fire, it's also supposed to gain accuracy. And that's what the Thunderlord does do. It gains a little bit of accuracy. It has a reduction in recoil when that fire rate is increased. But that patch was, for whatever reason, forgotten to be applied to the Abbadon and the Nova Mortis. They don't gain accuracy when the fire rates increase, and therefore they are much, much harder to control if you're actually trying to get that extra DPS from holding the trigger. So that's really interesting, and it means if you want to use one of these machine guns in, let's say, a strike, obviously if it's, you know, solar burn, you're going to use the Abbadon, even though it has, you know, more recoil as we've shown, being solar damage is so much better. But if you want to use one of these machine guns in heroic strikes, for example, and there is no burn, the Thunderlord is technically better than the other two, simply because it has that recoil mitigation. So that is a really interesting thing that I myself wasn't expecting when I set out to make this video. Now, one more slight difference that I wanted to cover before we start to wrap up this video is that you have different effects on all of these weapons. You know, the Thunderlord has electricity running through the gun, the Nova Mortis has void stuff running through it, and of course the Abbadon is on fire. However, when you're aiming down sights, the fire from the Abbadon actually affect your gun sights, and the other two effects have absolutely nothing to do with the gun sights. You don't see electricity really when you're aiming down sights with the Thunderlord, but with the Abbadon, you do see some distortion on your screen due to that fire effect, to which you can clearly see here. So not only could some players kind of find that, you know, maybe a little bit annoying, but it does distort your aim down sights vision. It could make you think, you know, maybe you saw an enemy when it's really just a bush or something because it was distorted by that flame effect, or potentially you could miss a shot or two because, again, of that distortion. It's just something that you may want to be aware of. The other two weapons do have clearer gun sights when aiming down sights than the Abbadon due to its effect. So, in the case of Nova Mortis versus Abbadon versus the Thunderlord actually wins. It has clearly less recoil than the other two weapons, which is, again, very surprising. I really hope Bungie fixes this because this really does seem like some sort of glitch or oversight. It really does seem like the Abbadon and the Nova Mortis should have the same recoil mitigation, just something along the lines went a little wrong and they missed out on that feature. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it interesting, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you want to see more Destiny content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to be notified of new uploads, make sure to press the bell beside subscribe. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at Recoil. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.